we're still in the recovery phase. I don't know what stage of grief I'm in, but I'm in one of them, and I imagine everybody else is too. But taking a step back, an incredibly exciting season. Especially the last 8 weeks or so. Couldn't be prouder of our guys. We won the AL West for the first time in a generation. A lot of guys had fantastic seasons, and to come within 8 outs of making it to the World Series, painful. But we'll wake up at some point in the offseason and get back after putting our team together for 26. Can't say enough about our fans and the way they showed out. From the workout days to putting people in the bowl and the environment, the atmosphere that we played in both the ALDS and the ALCS was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I've experienced a lot of cool things, and it was unbelievable. So hopefully we've taken a huge step this year. Hopefully we take another big one next year.
Jerry, just what have the last couple of days been like for you? There's no blueprint for how to handle something like this, but just how have you sort of processed it?
Yeah, not a lot of talking, mostly ignoring a lot of, communication, trying to just lay low. I think that's probably true of our staff, our players, is just trying to disconnect for a minute. And, a number of friends who do what I do for a living suggested, that it might be wise just to take a week or so and not think about baseball. But it's probably not our nature. We'll get back after it next week and start working at it. But, for now, mostly just, replaying, just like everybody else, our fans, replaying a variety of different, events in our heads. And, we'll probably, I will see George Springer on the ceiling of my sleep for years to come. It's just, he's tormented us for years. And, but again, really proud of what we've been able to accomplish, in the big picture this year, and looking forward to getting to work to put together a good team again for next year.
And when it comes to heading into, I know you're taking some time off, taking a breath, but given the success of the team this year, does heading into this offseason feel different than previous offseasons?
No, I can't say. I don't know. I'm still in Game 7, so I don't really know what this feels like, other than we've got a great foundation. We have, I think, universally one of the best farm systems in baseball. In terms of top-end prospects, preparedness of those prospects, guys who are near and ready, we're excited by that. And I look at the core of our team, and most of them are in their mid-late 20s. Most of them are having what should be the best years of their career. Our starting rotation returns in full. We've got core players like Cal and Julio and JP through the middle, and young players that populate other spots on the field, productive veterans all over the field that return, and we're right in the prime of what we should be doing. So it's exciting, and I can't say the only thing that makes that different is that this year we go in being the divisional champions, and that means something to us. It was part of our goal.
The moves you made at the trade deadline clearly made a difference. Obviously, Josh and Gino, and down the stretch in the playoffs, how much of a priority is bringing? Well, let's start with Josh back next season.
Yeah, obviously it's a priority, and we will take a step back from where we are before we truly assess, and we'll communicate with the players before we say anything publicly. But we're still, like I said, in grief mode, and so are they. But loved every minute with those guys and with others who are pending free agents or potentially pending free agents. And we've obviously been in planning mode, in competitive mode, and trying to put together plans and rosters to win games. And we've discussed 2026 and beyond, and we do that fairly regularly. So it's not going to sneak up on us, but it is appropriate to communicate with those guys before we do it publicly.
Obviously, World Series being the goal, but is there, maybe this isn't the right word, a certain validation that the moves that were made resulted in what we saw? Obviously, the clubhouse culture, we all saw how special it was, and yet no matter who you added, deadline or whatever, that was maintained and carried you this far.
I don't know if validation is the right word. I feel like, from the guys we've drafted and developed, signed internationally and developed, the group that's in there, the players that we've added through the years, Luis Castillo, Randy Arozarena, they fit. And, you know, our environment, our atmosphere, our culture is developed by those guys. That, you know, they're the ones that do it. And I thought Dan and the staff did a wonderful job. And you could not have hit any better on the additions we made at midseason. And, you know, we knew Gino, and we knew he would fit. He's, I mean, it's the good vibes is kind of fun, but it's who he is. He's just such an easy guy to play with, and a mentor for a lot of the players, and just how you should carry yourself and meet the challenges. And we didn't quite know what we would get in the big picture with Nails. We knew we were getting a hardcore player who was going to go out and drive. He played with a grit and a fire that we really wanted, and couldn't have been more impressed with everything he brings to the table. The leadership, just a quality human being. You know, he's got the snarl on the field, but he is a wonderful guy, incredibly smart, high baseball IQ, good teammate, hits just about every box, and couldn't have performed any better for us from start to finish.
When you know, as many people as he would be able to tell, he would always say he loves Seattle. He loved, excuse me, love being able to play here and everything. That from the other side of it, like, how cool is it to hear that, like, you know, he was here for 3 months, and it's like, yeah, he really fell in love with this place too.
You know, I said this near year's end when we were going through some of our prep for the postseason and in the ALDS. Part of our roster building plan has become what we do at the deadline. You know, it's a way for us to access players that we generally taken advantage of, and we lean into our prospect system. We lean into where we are on the win curve at that time, and we rely on Seattle. You know, our fan base, on the beauty of the city, the weather that we get. You know, if you pick somebody up in July and bring them into Seattle, they're probably not going to be disappointed by what happens over the next 3 months. And when you're in a great run, like our team was on at the end, and you experience our fan base in full force the way we did in September and into October, I don't know how you couldn't fall in love. And that's part of the calculus. And I think it's part of why, you know, guys like Louie and Randy, or even the players who've been here, Cal, JP, Julio, they want to stay. And we want them to. And I think that's true of Josh and Gino, and, you know, there are others. You know, Polo had a wonderful year for us, and there's a decision on the table with him. It's going to be an interesting couple of weeks here, but by and large, I like these kinds of problems. They're good when you have good players to deal with.
Jerry, you listed a lot of reasons why you guys are in a great position in terms of the core being young and in their prime and the farm system, all those things. Philosophically, from your position, what's most important to make sure that this is the beginning of a sustained run? What's your role in that, would you say? You know,
I feel like we've already experienced the beginning. You know, this train's been moving for a while. I think people are just now catching on to it. Yeah. And, you know, I think we've had, you know, it's the first time in our organization's history we've had 5 straight winning seasons. We've won 90 games 3 of the last 5 years. We've been to 2 of the last 4 postseasons. We've now won a division title. We're just checking off boxes. And, you know, there's 2 big boxes for us to check off. One is to be the American League champs, and the other is to win the World Series. And, you know, the part that I play in it is shared with Dan, with Justin, with our front office group and our baseball ops team, is to put the best team we can on the field for the present and for the long term. And, you know, my job is more big picture. You know, Dan's job is more riveting down to the day-to-day. But on some level, we all, you know, hold on to the rope of both of those things, and we're comfortable with our process.
Going back to the farm system, we saw kind of the first wave of those players come in this year. When you look at the foundation of this roster, do you feel this is kind of the ideal situation to start working in the guys like Colt, like Michael, like Laz, and the rest of those guys?
I mean, I don't know if there is ever an ideal. You know, it's just their time. Their time is when their time is. And, you know, we saw Cole for, I would say, a number of months in the middle of the summer this year perform. You know, he was going. There were about 6-8 weeks there where he was one of the better second basemen in the league. And then he hit a slump toward the end of the year, and obviously we made a decision to hold him off the postseason rosters and play Polo more frequently at second base. But, you know, Ben Williamson carried us through a really tough time just simply by playing elite defense and contributing where he could with the bat. And then he had an opportunity to go back to AAA and reset a little bit. Thought he was great. We did carry him on one of the rosters simply because we knew we could rely on him to convert outs and give you a gritty at bat. You know, Colt Emerson will play a part in our season. I'm certain of that in 2026. And, you know, his rise has been quick. we've got, depending on who the system or grading group is, we've got 8 or 9 of the top 100 prospects in baseball, and those guys tend to come quick, and they let you know when they're ready. And we've played it that way with Cal, with Julio, with Logan, with George, with Wu, with Bryce. It's as these guys have made their way toward the big leagues, we just make sure that nothing gets in their way when it's their time. And this is a little different. We have a built-out, mature team. We have a number of star players around the field that I think the world at large just found out were stars, and we're going to have to be a little choosier with how we implement our young players, but they're going to play a big part in what we do, now and moving forward. That's how you sustain.
You mentioned discussions about plans for 2026. What do you anticipate payroll to be next year? Similar to this year?
I would say similar to where we ended the year, as a starting point. So, we ended the season, I think, with the second highest or highest payroll that we've ever had as a franchise. And this was always the goal, was to methodically build toward what we were doing. And, I'm comfortable that the resources that we're given, we're going to have every ability to go out and put together a championship quality team. And like we have in recent years, when we get into the right position, I'm certain that we will be aggressive in doing the next thing.
Does that include at the deadline? Will you be able to do that too next year?
We've always been able to do that. If I look back over these last 5 years, we tend to just monitor where we are. And then in seasons like 22 and 24 and 25, we lean in. And a lot of our team, I said this toward the end, there was a point in September this year where 11 of our 26 active players were acquired at trade deadline trades. So, in one way or the other, we've always been a very active team in general, but particularly active at the trade deadline. And that's where Nails and Gino and Randy and The Rock and I could go on, Mooney and Brash. They all came from that time on the clock somewhere in the last 5 years. So we're in, and if it means you're acquiring, real earners, guys like Gino or Josh or Louis Castillo or Randy, I think we've been in that boat for a while now, and the commitment that we get from ownership is real. And, this year, the uniqueness was that we added 2 of those types of players, and I think it shocked people. But, we have the support of our ownership group, and they've always been open to us pushing in. And, we did push this summer in a way that maybe we didn't quite push before, but we think that's, again, part of our roster building model, is to really lean into what we can access in July and lean on our city, our ballpark, our fan base, and our atmosphere to really help seal the deal, because it's the best recruiting tool we have.
When you push like that in the middle of the season and ownership sees the amazing magic that happened at this ballpark and the incredible success and the rank of a World Series, do you think the effect of that to them kind of sends the message of maybe we can feel a little bit more comfortable extending our budget more than we're comfortable doing? Or do you think that it only confirms their belief of, no, we feel comfortable as a mid-market team in terms of payroll?
I don't know the answer to this question. Yeah, you'll have to ask somebody else. That's not, I can't answer, but to say that the resources we've been given us put us right about in the middle from a league perspective and payroll. We've been very aggressive at trade deadlines to push in when it's our time. We do have star players. We have signed some of the biggest extensions in recent baseball history, with our center fielder especially and our catcher. We have star power. We pay our stars. We keep our players. I'm very comfortable with the resources that we've been given, and we're not in a contest to see if we can outspend somebody. Just make smart moves that put the best team on the field.
If you could use one word or phrase to wrap up this season, I know I'm putting you on the spot with that question, but how do you feel right now?
I'm going to have a different word now than I'll have in a couple of weeks, but disappointed. And I know everybody else is too. It's, disappointing.
Is it not satisfying, though, to start to see what you have built? You said before progress isn't linear, but to see this team go further than to see all that with the homeroom and the additions and the trade acquisitions, like, is that not, you've built something sustainable?
And that was always, the goal broadly. We've talked for years about wanting to build a sustainable team, getting here, being at this in this position every year. I'd like to win more than 90 games and not have to squeak through. But, this year we charged through. And, to do it with players that we've known since they were 16, 17, 20 years old, it's an amazing feeling, when you're walking around the clubhouse and they feel like family. Every player, I said this near year's end, Justin and I have been together here 9 years. Dan has been here for his baseball life, at least. and the others in our system, Scott Hunter and Andy McKay and the people who bring the ideas to life and help these players develop, they've all been here for a decade. And, when you have that type of familiarity, and all of those people were traveling with the team, toward year's end, and we're in Toronto, and, the satisfaction that you feel when those same players that you knew when they were in HP camp coming in for their first opportunity to see what the Mariners were about, and they still invest in that. And I guarantee you this, that there will be players on there, just like our top draft picks welcome and invite the next group of top draft picks. Those players will be on the phone talking to minor league players that are in our system today that they may never have met, to sing the virtues of the high performance camp and the things that we do because of the impact that it's had on their career. And that's Wu, that's Bryce, that's Cal, that's Logan. They do it all the time. It's Julio. And they do it without being asked, which I think that's when you know your culture is good.
To be able to have locked Cal down the way he did before the season, major coup. Do you foresee trying to do something similar with Logan this offseason as well?
Yeah, we'll talk to Logan before we talk to anybody else about that.
Hey, the playoffs are different, and I think anybody that was even traveling along with you felt that. I mean, it's very different. What are some things that you guys learned from going that deep?
I say this, and I try very hard to live it. There is no success in failure. You're just learning more, and sometimes you learn more and you get a little hardware along the way. We've learned a lot of lessons in these last handful of years, what to do, what not to do. But I think for our players, what they learned is what they're capable of. And, I think that was a big lesson for all of us to learn. You for years, we've had a really talented roster. We would get to a certain point and we would just stall, and there was no next phase. There was no next jump or charge. You just wait. You can't wait to win. You push through. And I think the effort that we saw from our players, the commitment from our staff, there was fatigue, there was mental exhaustion, there was intensity in a baseball game that few of our players or staff had ever experienced before, and they met it. That's what we learned.
What stands out to you about Dan as a manager?
His calm. He is methodical in everything he does. He trusts in the people around him, from the coaches to the players, especially the players. Leans in and wants it to be a player-driven environment with player leadership that comes from the clubhouse out. And his leadership style is to cultivate that leadership within the clubhouse, and has been from the time he was working as a special assistant in player development. He is more thoughtful about the player as a person than just about anybody I've been around in baseball. It's a tough line to toe as a manager, because the win is so important, and so many in that position through the years, and this dates back before any of us were born. They will sacrifice whatever needs to be sacrificed for the win, and Dan will sacrifice whatever he needs to sacrifice for the person. And I think the result of that is then the players want to win in a different way than just the day they show up on the first day of spring training, because of the way they're treated. And can't say enough about who he is as a person. You all deal with him. He's a tremendous human being, and he is the idea of doing the right thing. You don't have to suggest that to Dan. He just naturally does it. I think the players love him, and when he is in the moment, I think he is more prone to leaning into the village. We talk all the time about every season, this organization, it's about the village. It's about your PD. It's your scouting. It's people who don't work in baseball operations who contribute to what we do every day. It extends through our fan base. You need every one of them to create anything from guidelines, plans, player plans, game plans, energy, whatever that thing is. And Dan understands all that. He's lived a number of different, I guess, lives as a Mariner, and he's been the community guy, he's been the catcher, he's been the manager, he's done a lot of things, and I hope he's here for years more to keep doing it.